conquering the blood rings and collecting his bounties. You should look at NECA Toys Predator 2 Ultimate Warrior Predator. A student of ancient Yautja fighting traditions, Warrior is one of the few elite hunters forged in fire by the Blood Ring, a combative fighting sport created ages ago when the Amengi invaders forced Yautja ancestors to fight one another in a Colosseum-style battle. As was the case hundreds of generations before, the use of energy weapons in the sport is not permitted. However, mastery of melee weapons is essential to survive. In modern times, this combat tradition continues as a measure of strength and skill, pitting the strongest Yautja fighters against vicious alien creatures, often xenomorphs, fighting to the death. Despite his elite status, Warrior continues to revisit the Blood Ring when not on hunts to keep his skills sharp. Celebrated for his victories, he is considered to be many of the toughest among all hunters. One of the eldest members of the Lost Tribe, Warrior is trusted right hand of Greyback and is the weapons master for off-world missions, in addition to acting as an effective plan B for taking down the most dangerous targets whenever necessary. Some hunters use self-destruct devices as a last resort, but the Lost Tribe calls in Warrior. When there is no plan B, my plan A, on the other hand, is first to measure off this figure. I suppose before we do that, I'd like to thank the folks over at NECA Toys that did provide this sample of the Ultimate Warrior Predator that we could have a look at in this video. Grabbing now, as promised, here's the tape measure. Clickety-click, barba trick. We're going to take it right to the very top of Lost's head. Now, in many of the cases we already know that Predator figures tend to have swappable heads, but I'm going to stick with this one for the time being until we're ready to swap things out. With this head in place, you're looking at the figure being about 7 1/4, because 8 inches is up here, so I'm going to say he's about 7 1/4 inches in height, or that works out to be a figure that's about 19.5 centimeters tall. Seems we've been looking at a lot of Predator figures as of late, so for a comparison I can actually slide this guy over and bring in the recently looked at Shaman Predator. One thing I actually did do in this case was I took his poncho off. I'm still calling it a poncho. I took the poncho off simply just to also show you as well that they are using, once again, a lot of the same similar molds, similar torso, similar arms, and similar legs as well. Making now the rounds of the things that come included with Lost Predator. Starting first, the figure comes included with 2 Shurikens. Seems we always seem to start these reviews with Shurikens. I would love that at some point NECA could release a 1-to-1 scale of a Predator Shuriken, or throwing disc. You can see again, they have 2 configurations. One that's already folded up compact and ready to be stored away. One that actually is extended for close quarter contact. With this one actually, you get a hand that's also suited for holding that. So if you look at this hand, for example, it's in a kind of slightly relaxed pose. You can take those fingers then and line the thumb up into the hole, and you can then take those fingers and slot them into place. You actually can hold it for, again, close quarter melee attacks. This disc doesn't technically hold, or one thing also you can do as well is you can take this hand too. He has this hand that sort of cups the disc as he's ready to throw it. This disc doesn't store anywhere on the figure's body. However, this one does. Just quickly to show you guys the detailing done to that. I like that there's a little bit of age always done to these weapons, so it doesn't look like they're clean and been recently only used. These are ones that they probably have had in their arsenal for a long period of time, and many probably have seen tons of battles actually. But you can actually take the Shuriken Smart Disc of Predator and you can holster it on the side of its leg. There's a little flap that's on the top here. It looks a little bit like a wizard's sleeve. Simply just kind of tuck it into that and then push it down. If you get it in there, it should stay in place. And usually when he has that many weapons, especially a Predator figure with this many weapons, usually I'll then take the Shuriken or Smart Disc and I'll holster it on the side of his leg. Again, we'll quickly look at the hands. A couple of different hands available. One for holding the shuriken extended or opened up. One for cupping and about to throw it as a frisbee. And then he also comes included with a gestured hand too. Now, I actually have the other gripping hand right now, because this figure does also come with a gestured hand that's on this side, or kind of more the dynamic hand. He also has the mirror flip to that to go on this side, but he also has a gripping hand also, suited for holding any one of the other accessories that we're about to have a look at. Like, for example, the figure comes included with a combi stick. In fact, he comes with actually two variations of combi stick. One that's extended out, ready to be used. One is folded up and able to be stored away. The thing, though, about the combi stick, first of all, it's got some really nice detailing. I love that they've added all this nice copper color to it, and they've added more of a darker coloring of that copper as the middle section of its handle. You can see just a load amount of detail that they've added to sculpting just the handle portion of this. Again, for such small, really, accessories, it always impresses me the amount of detail that they're able to incorporate into these. So this can obviously fit into his hand. That seems like more like no-brainer. But this one actually, on the other hand, not on the other hand, but this one doesn't seem to have any place to be stored on the back of his body. Normally, there would be a clip right here. I don't have a clip here on the back of his body, but normally you would be able to take the combi stick and attach it onto the back of his body. Now, that could have been the case where they've just left it off intentionally, and they obviously have just reused the body then from another figure, or maybe my clip is just happening to be missing. If you have the Lost Predator, if you have the Warrior Predator, let me know down below if yours have a clip on the back of his body, because normally the combi stick should attach just to the back of his armor like this. Can put that to the side. The figure, going maybe with some of the smaller accessories next, the figure comes included with these Gauntlet Blasters. Well, essentially he comes with one, but it's two different configurations. He has a flat version of that, and located here on the side of his form, he actually has a little tiny, little slotted area here that you can then take the gauntlet in its folded down state and just attach it onto his form, continuing the trend of the rest of the sculpt that he has in his gauntlet already. Or, which you can also do too, carefully, well, hopefully not losing it, then you can also take this version, which essentially has this whole back section slid back, ready to be fired, and also has a longer post on the bottom. Again, you just attach this onto the top, slotting it into the provided slot we already talked about, and now he has himself a little blaster there. Nice little added thing. It's always nice to add these extra things to these Predator figures. It jazzes them up a little bit. I guess while we're also talking about his gauntlet, something else that's always a trait here is he also has a little control pad. Now, I can't speak for whether that's actually self-destruct. That doesn't seem like something that Warrior would be doing himself, but it's got some decent detailing done to the inside panel here. And this just, again, folds shut. The figure also comes included with a blast effect, primarily for a shoulder-mounted plasma caster. It's done here in a translucent blue. It kind of looks actually like a lollipop. Painted on the end is a brighter blue, but most of it is actually more of a translucent blue. And you can see the very obvious entryway, the slot on the bottom of it. This just, again, move the head just out of the way, and this plugs onto the top of it, just like that. Now, normally for me, even though I just now dropped it on the floor, normally for me, I'm not one that actually likes to display these blast effects with the plasma casters, just because it takes up a lot of space here. And I find sometimes it's a detractor from the head sculpt, which again, we're about to have a look at. I'm going to have to go get that blast effect in a second. Remind me if you can. The figure also comes included with two variations also of skull. If you prefer your skulls stand alone without any spinal cord still married to them, then he has this one right here. It looks like it's still got some blood or the remains of dried blood still on it, so it might be recently plucked. You see it's a nice dark discoloration that they've added there, some darker colors for the recessed sections of its sockets, the eyeball sockets that is, and also even the nasal cavity there as well have been painted nice dark black. It doesn't open and close, but it's a really nice looking skull. There is also what looks to be a peg on the bottom of this. Now, there really isn't technically, I mean, you could take the combi stick, I suppose, and just balance it as best you can. I know that's just gonna ultimately just fall, but you can balance it somewhat on that, or I suppose you probably could use another Predator weapon and plug it onto the bottom of it. It's a very small hole, though. If you prefer, though, still to have your spinal cord attached, not yours, the one that comes included with the Predator, then there's this variation as well. Now, looking at the spinal cord, it's just molded plastic. It doesn't have a wire frame. Not that you need to be bending necessarily. Geez, I want my spinal cord to be a little bit more dynamically posed. That's a little strange. One thing I also do really like is that the skulls look like they're from two completely different people. This skull here that I'm pointing at right now is a little bit smaller than this one right here that's still attached to the spinal cord. It's a little attention to detail that I do appreciate like that. And then the figure also comes included, I love this, comes included with a flail. It's basically like a sectional mace. It's something that, of course, when impact, hitting that, bludgeoning whatever his target is, would inflict some serious damage. There's a little bit of silver, as you can see, but the majority of it is kind of more of a copper grayish color. There's also these air holes here. Not really necessarily air holes, they're mold holes, but it's also just to tell you there's a wire frame to these, so you can bend and manipulate the flail. It's very thin plastic though, so I don't know if I would recommend necessarily bending this and leaving it for long periods of time, as it could start developing stress marks in it. Love the fact that he comes included with a flail. Then the figure comes with what I feel to be is like the difference maker. If I was to call this weapon anything, it would be the difference maker. He comes in included with this giant battle axe. The axe is very enormous, like very adorned with detail. In fact, just to put it next to the Warrior Predator, you can see it's in fact taller. If you count the top of the point here, it's taller than the Warrior Predator himself. But again, like, it's very nicely detailed. You got some use there of copper colors, some grays added in there as well, and a really shiny, polished gunmetal gray. It looks like it'd be sharp to the touch. I'm not going to make the very obvious joke of pretending I've sliced myself, because I know one of these days I'm going to jinx myself. I'm going to be drawing blood, bleeding all over the place, quickly running to grab a Band-Aid while the camera's still hitting record. But yeah, it's a really neat looking. I mean, from the bottom end of it, it does look like a traditional Yautja combi stick, but really from the top, it's the difference maker. And any one of these weapons, by the way, can be wielded in his hand, as he does again have that gripping hand. So we just slide this in. The plastic is pretty soft anyways on the fingers, although it probably would make a little bit more sense to pry the fingers a little bit more away and have the stick a little bit further up, the handle at least a little bit further up. Displaying this figure with the axe is really the only option I have, at least. But at least he has so many weapons available at his disposal. There's tons of different ways of displaying this figure with different accessories that he comes included with. The last of his accessories always seems to be in these reviews the alternate swappable head sculpt. Looking at the head right now, this is the defaulted head, by the way. I believe it bears some resemblance to a wild boar predator. I think that was the name of the predator itself. Very much a standards-looking helmet for that model of helmet, or that helmet design. One thing I really like about the Warrior Predator is the notable stripes that he has on the top of his. It kind of looks insectoid. In fact, actually, this armor bears a very strong resemblance to City Hunter from Predator 2, especially the way it's got more of a organic look, or kind of cockroach design, insect design. We'll talk more about it in a moment. But the head sculpt is really good on this one. The thing about the visor, though, and especially the eyes, is everything here in the front is more squished down. This particular design of Yautja helmet actually has a much broader crest helmet, or a further up area of the helmet, and a smaller area space for its face. But again, it kind of bears a little bit of a resemblance to the City Hunter. You can see all the loads of detail that they've added to this. The sides remind me a little bit of Celtic Predator, just a little bit here on the sides. I really like this helmet. The thing about it, though, is normally when you get a figure like this that has such a great helmet like this, I'm always one to usually lean to displaying the figure with these face sculpts, or these specific head sculpt. The thing about, though, Warrior Predator, I just want to show you like the alternate head sculpt he comes also included with as well. This is a fantastic head. I might say it's one of my favorite unmasked Predator figures, and if you gave me a little bit of time to think about it, maybe 10-15 minutes, we're not going to bog down a video with 10-15 minutes of me trying to think about it, but I think I would probably put this guy pretty high on my list of one of my favorite unmasked Predator head sculpts. It's a shame, really. No shame to really NECA, but it's a shame, really, of having now this figure in my collection, because I'm actually kind of leaning more to the idea of displaying him unhelmeted, which is so strange for me to say that, because I usually always like to have the unique look, unique trait of having the Predators with their helmets on. To show you, though, what he looks like with the helmet off, I'm going to go ahead and just pop this off the ball joint. I want to hold on to the torso as good as you can and just wiggle it off the post. There we go. If you're having any problems, by the way, you can easily just use a hairdryer or hot water and then just move those dreadlock hairs out of the way, just enough that you can get access to the peg joint. And then we're just going to pop it onto the post. Get as much on there as we could possibly get it. And there you have Lost Predator I keep wanting to call this guy Lost Predator for some reason. I think it's probably because it's blue that I automatically start calling this guy Lost Predator. But Warrior Predator has definitely a lot of blue going on here. Now, I can't tell by the way he was packaged if his one mandible down here was supposed to be this close to the top one. Because with how far this one goes far down, I feel like this one should be also a little bit lower as well. It probably was the way it was sitting inside the tray. If anything, I probably could heat this up just a little bit to bring the mandible down. Luckily, at least it's softer plastic, so I'm not going to be breaking it. But would you all agree that that's a pretty good looking head sculpt for an unmasked Yautja? I mean, again, you got the nice stripes that they've added to the top here. Something, unfortunately, that would be lost by keeping the helmet on. I mean, just to show you the difference between the two. It has so much, I feel, more personality with the helmet off. At least that's my feeling. It got one thing that's also very, very obvious on this one that you don't see too often either, is the very dark purple that they put inside the mouth area, just inside where the mandibles sit. He's also got very bright yellow eyes. But one thing I really like the most about this is just the use of the striped effect, like the striped artwork that they've added to the top of the head. It really makes for an interesting looking predator. As for the rest of the body, though, when we look at the body itself, I do notice with this head sculpt now in place that the head seems notably lighter than the rest of his body. It keeps still to the pretty close enough blue, but the blue I've noticed here on the body, the arms and the legs are darker, only by just like a hair smidgen darker than what we actually get for the face. It's not enough that it looks too jarring, but it's certainly something I did notice. One thing I also did notice here with Warrior Predator is that he has a very long neck. Even with the joint as far down as I can get it, the neck seems very obviously long. So I may want to actually just... It could also be, too, like the dreads. The dreads have been squished inside the packaging. Let's just fix these up just a little bit. If I bring these out just a little bit, untangle them, so to speak. Yeah, I think that probably will fill up the gap a little bit and maybe not make the neck look so obviously long. Again, as I mentioned, the rest of the body has very similar armor to City Hunter, especially the insectoid-looking plasma caster shoulder-mounted cannon, which does have, like all the other cases before, articulation, so you can move this back and forth. You can also, as well, slide this, shimmy this down the little canal that's on the back of the figure. Sometimes a little harder to do, but you can just slide this down carefully if you prefer to have your plasma caster a little bit further back on the figure. Other than just the already mentioned blue, you've got some nice use of darker colors of blue added in there, some stripes, which again I really like on this particular figure. And primarily his body kind of keeps to the more, like the armor at least, keeps more to like a very dingy, kind of rusted copper color. He has on the shoulders. He has a little bit more of the lighter colors brushed here on the back of his body. He's got a little bit more of the gold here also added to the front of his armor as well. But like all the rest of the figure, it's very much a standard looking Predator design, and that's no fault at all. He's got the one separate skirting here that actually covers over top of his loincloth. That's just attached by strings connecting both the sides. And then underneath that, he's got the traditional loincloth for many of the tribe predators. The side holster there, again, for the smart disc we've already had a look at. And again, very standard looking standard legs. I mean, the mold-wise, at least, the lower calves. Not that much different than what we're used to seeing with the Predators. Complete with the fact that there still is that peg. That peg just happened to also be, I'm going to just bring back in Shaman Predator here. You can see that they're still using the same leg mold. Now, there's nothing that really attaches onto the leg. I think in the movie that would have been the place to use the net. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there's nothing that actually comes with this figure that attaches to either one of these figures' legs, but the pegs are still there. And again, you've got regular standard Predator feet, again, brushed nicely here with the blue and the black. There are peg holes technically on the undersides of Warrior's feet, so again, you can attach them onto a display stand. Let's look at the articulation here for Warrior Predator. First, his head is on that ball post we've already had a look at, so the head does rotate back and forth. It does look up, does look down, and does look back and forth. While you're doing this, of course, make very careful that you don't actually clip and break the little cannon off the top of his shoulder. Speaking of his shoulders, the shoulders are on hinge joints. This one is going to be a little bit more restricted, simply just because even though it's softer plastic, even though it's actually attached further down by his bicep, it's going to cause a little bit more of a chaos when it comes to actually bringing his arms past the point of 45 degrees. This one actually does move a little higher up than 45 degrees. He also does have the gauntlet blade. I can't believe I left off talking about the gauntlet blades. Traditional Predator armory there. You have the gauntlet blades. Of course, they can extend out. You can also push them back in. But he does have a double hinge on the elbow. He has a bicep swivel also as well. And the hands rotate also all the way around. Although a little harder, obviously, to get around the gauntlet blade itself. Figure has also an upper torso ball joint. Figure has also concealed underneath a lower torso abdominal joint. The legs do split out. You can take the legs and move them forward and move them back. Mild swivel at the top of the thigh. The figure has also as well, possessing a double hinge in the knee. And once again, there's no articulation here, as simply just a continued trend of using the same sculpt as the calf. So you can't swivel, actually, the shin guards at all. The feet, though, however, do hinge up and down this way. There's also an ankle pivot this way. And as already mentioned one last time, he does have pegals on the undersides of his feet. I like the look of Warrior Predator. You know, again, I don't know. Probably I will revert back to this one because, at least for me, when it usually comes to my collection space, unless it's Jungle Hunter, which is the only time I think I actually have. Actually, no, that's not true. There's a couple of my Predator figures on my shelf that I kept unhelmeted. I'm really torn to actually keep this guy without the helmet on. And again, just to bring in the comparison of Shaman Predator, even though they are using the same body, NECA does use a lot of the same body molds when it comes to Predators from one to the other, but you can see really very much different paint that's approached to the figures. And of course, the way they're dressed also is very different as well. Shaman used a lot of these more material wraps around his body, whereas the Warrior Predator is actually really sticking to the same kind of design elements as the rest of the tribe, or really also City Hunter, which a lot of the design is kind of heavily based from. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether I'm going to keep the way he looks right now, or if I'm going to revert back to the helmet. I like the helmet, but I think by putting the unhelmeted head sculpt back into the tray, I'm really, unfortunately, just missing out the opportunity to really get a full experience of how much color, how much brightness, and how much detail they actually put into that unhelmeted head sculpt. Hoping I hadn't called this guy too many times Lost Predator over the course of this review. You'll have to excuse me. When I see the blue deco done here for Warrior Predator, I instantly start thinking Lost Predator and that cool mechanical helmet that he had that had the glowing eyes. Lost Predator is also still one of my favorite Predator figures, but by seeing the blue all decked out on this figure very much again reminded me of Lost Predator. One thing that goes really well for this figure is the amount of blue that they've used and the softer blue that they ended up choosing as well. The blue isn't too intrusive. And one thing that they also have done as well is while there's still that softer baby blue that they use, they did also use a darker blue in some of the detailed areas, not to mention the stripes that he has decked out from the top of his head to the bottom of his body. One thing that also goes well for this figure is the amount of weapons that he wields. I don't know if it's considered too excessive that I've actually got him displayed with both the flail and his battle axe. Maybe that is a little too much. But when you have accessories this cool, I'd hate to really put them back in the tray and put them away and have the figure only displayed with one. No, I think Warrior Predator is going to be displayed on my shelf with actually both weapons in his hands. And you can call that excessive. I just call that a really cool looking Predator figure. The thing about it though is, again, when you're looking at a figure as good as this is, with as good of a head sculpt as it is, it's really hard to decide which head sculpt I want to use when displaying this particular Predator. Yes, there's always the option of displaying him with the helmet. And usually, 9 times out of 10, that's the thing I like about the Predator figures that make them so unique. That's one of the reasons why, for example, Shaman Predator will still continue to have displayed with that skull mask that he wears. Because again, that makes him so unique than all the other Predator figures I have on the shelf. Warrior Predator is a different thing though. While I do like the helmet that he comes included with, I also equally like the unhelmeted head sculpt as well. The use of the blues and adding that darker purplish blue for the inside of his mandibles does merely make the head sculpt pop in this case. I'm almost kind of considering getting a second Warrior Predator simply so I can have him displayed 2 different ways on the shelf. It's not the first time I've done this with buying a Predator figure twice, so I can actually have him displayed in 2 different looks. And it's probably going to be the case also here with Warrior Predator. The head sculpts are just too good to put back one in the tray and leave the other one on the figure's neck. What do you guys think, though, of Warrior Predator? Whether you've picked up either this figure for yourself or based on this review, which head sculpt would you choose when it comes to displaying the Warrior Predator? Once again, a big thank you as well to the folks over at NECA Toys that did provide this sample of the Ultimate Warrior Predator that we can have a look at in this video. If you enjoyed this video, hit it with a like. If you're loving the content you guys are seeing, and don't mind that I called this guy Lost Predator a couple of times in this review, but certainly if you want to stick around and stay tuned for more reviews, the key to making sure that you're not missing out on a moment is by hitting that subscribe button down below and turning on the bell notification. While we have wrapped up things with Predators for the time being, there will be more NECA reviews coming your way, so make sure you're keeping your Predator peepers peeled. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.